My father looked at me as if I were a stranger. After he remarried, he erased me from his life as if I had never existed. But years later, in the hospital, lying in a cold bed, he called my name. But it was not the name of the son he raised, was mine. If this story has touched you, leave a like and subscribe. This really helps us tell more stories like this. My father was always my childhood hero. He picked me up from school, taught me to ride my bike, and told me bedtime stories. He was the kind of man who made a point of being present for every little detail. My mother always said, "You take after your father, observant, calm, kind-hearted." But all of that is in the past, as if it had just been a good dream before a long nightmare. Everything started to change when I was 12. My mom and dad started fighting more often. Small things turned into arguments. Long silences filled Sundays. Until one day, he went out to think and never came back the same way. Shortly after, my news came, divorce. And along with it, another bombshell. My father was living with a woman named Lucia, someone I had never heard of until then. For the first few months, he still called me. He said he missed me, that one day things would go back to normal. But the calls gradually dwindled, and so did the visits. On my 13th birthday, he texted me, "I'm sorry I can't go today. I had something unexpected with Lucia. I love you, son." That day, I waited for him all afternoon with the cake on the table. I blew out the candle myself. Over time, I began to understand. He was forming another life, one that didn't include me anymore. He began to distance himself from everything that reminded him of his old family. He stopped attending school meetings, end-of-year performances, and lunches on important occasions. When my mother got sick, he didn't even ask how she was. He just said her life was too full. But what was full wasn't time. It was the new family. Lucia was everything my mother never was, according to him. Young, elegant, forward-thinking, as he put it. But what I saw was something else. A cold, calculating, and above all, manipulative woman. Soon after they got married, Arthur, his new son, and with Arthur, I was erased for good. I started hearing stories from distant relatives. "Your father only talks about Arthur now. Did you see that he posted pictures with the baby? It doesn't even look like he has another child. He's setting up a whole new room for the boy." Meanwhile, my room in his house became a deposit. My things were packed and put in the garage. My name was being forgotten in conversations. My place at the table replaced. There was a Christmas that hurt more than all the others. My mother, still trying to maintain a minimum bond, called him. "Gustavo is going to spend Christmas with you this year. You said you were going to pick him up." The answer was dry. "It won't work. We're going to the beach with Arthur. We've already planned everything." It was that day that I realized I was no longer his son. I was the weight of the old life. Lucia made a point of treating me like a stranger whenever we saw each other. He spoke to me as if I were a problem he hadn't solved yet. "Gustavo is already big, right? He should be able to walk on his own 2 feet by now." When I was 14, I heard this and swallowed hard. My father watched everything silently. He never defended me. He never said anything. It was as if I had slowly ceased to exist, until he himself, I started to believe that I really wasn't part of it. But time, it observes everything. And one day, he charges, with interest. Over time, the separation stopped being emotional and became something practical, almost bureaucratic. Lucia got what she wanted, to reorganize my father's life around her and her new son. And that included erasing any trace of his previous existence, especially me. It all started with small excuses. "Your father is busy today. He had to go to the doctor with Arthur. This week was tough, you better see each other next month." And like someone getting used to absence, I stopped waiting. My messages started to be ignored. My messages were viewed and left silent. He didn't block me. It was worse. He left me there, hanging, as if I wasn't important enough to even be truly rejected. Until one day, after almost a year without seeing him, I gathered up the courage and went to his house. Lucia answered. She had her hair tied up, reading glasses on, and an expression of contained disgust. "What do you want, Gustavo?" "To see my father. He's busy. In fact, it would be a good idea if you called before you came." From the back of the house, I heard his voice. "Who is it?" "It's Gustavo. He appeared here out of nowhere." A silence, and then the answer that destroyed me. "Tell him I'm resting." She closed the door slowly, as if I were an inconvenient salesperson. I stood there at the gate. The street seemed colder. The house stranger. He was in there, alive, conscious, and he chose not see me. I walked home in silence. My mother looked at me sadly. She didn't even ask anything. She knew. The following month, a letter arrived from the registry office. My name had been removed as a dependent on my father's health insurance plan. During the same period, I stopped being included in photos, trips, and his birthday celebrations. A cousin sent me a message. "Your father threw a beautiful party for Arthur. It was at the new buffet in town. I didn't even know you hadn't gone." She didn't know. Nobody knew. I wasn't invited. A few years later, I discovered that he had changed his will. A distant aunt, still angry at the way he treated me, was the one who told me, "Your name doesn't even appear anymore, Gustavo. The will is entirely in Arthur's name. Even the house where you were born will be his." At that moment, something in me died completely. It wasn't just about being forgotten anymore. It was about being intentionally turned off. He didn't want me to be a part of his future, not even as a memory. I stopped trying. I deleted the number from my cell phone. I blocked him on social media. And I decided that from that day on I was no longer interested in knowing whether he was alive or dead. The truth is, at that moment, for me, he was already dead. But fate still had plans. Plans that neither he nor Lucia could control. I thought I'd felt it all. The absence. The contempt. The shame of being the forgotten son. But nothing compared to what was to come. It had been a while since I'd heard my father's name. After I turned 18, he practically disappeared from my existence. No texts, no calls, not even a formal congratulations. And I pretended everything was fine. I lived my life as best I could. I worked at a small grocery store near my home, helped my mother with the bills, and when I had free time, took some free online courses. I wanted to get out of there. Build something. Show that despite everything, I wasn't invisible. But the universe has a strange way of testing us and showing us the depths of human cruelty. It was on a normal Tuesday, while I was restocking the shelves, that I received a visit from an aunt, my father's older sister. She arrived breathless with wide eyes and a folded paper in her hands. "Gustavo, I needed to tell you this before it's too late." It was a copy of the will, official, notarized and everything. My father's name was right at the top, followed by Lucia, his legal wife, and further down, Arthur's name, recorded as sole legitimate heir. No mention of me, not a single line, not a single excerpt, not a single hidden clause. My name did not exist on that document. "How could he have done that?" I asked, my voice trembling. Lucia pressed. "She said you were a problem from his old life, and he accepted it. He said it was better this way, that Arthur was the son he always wanted to have." I felt the ground disappear. It was no longer just an emotional rejection, a legal erasure, cold, calculated, official. I didn't cry. I couldn't. It was as if something inside me had broken so hard that even the tears refused to come out. That night, I stared at the ceiling for hours. My mother slept in the next room, exhausted as always, and I thought, How can someone who once carried me in his arms have the courage to erase me from his story like that? I tried to find answers, but there were none. What there was a deep pain, a feeling that I could disappear from the world and he wouldn't even notice. It was at that moment that I decided I would never depend on his name again. I would be my own surname, my own foundation, my own redemption. And even without knowing how, in that emptiness the impulse to start over was born. Did he wish I didn't exist? Then I would exist in the most powerful way possible, winning. After that night, something inside me changed. It wasn't an outburst of rage nor a desire for cinematic revenge. It was quieter than that, more firm. I just wanted to stop being what they said I was, insignificant. I started small. I stayed at the grocery store, but I began observing everything, how deliveries, orders, inventory, and cash flow worked. I didn't just do the work. I learned from it. In his spare time, he studied business administration and finance on his cell phone. He took free courses and watched long YouTube videos about how to start a business, how to save money, and how to grow in silence. My mother, even without knowing all the details, looked at me with contained pride. She knew I was trying to build something. She just didn't know what yet. Little by little, I saved money. I cut out everything superfluous. I walked. I ate at home. I said no to any invitation that cost more than I could afford. 3 years later, with almost nothing in my pocket but a lot of willpower, I rented a small garage in the neighboring neighborhood. It was dirty, poorly lit, and smelled musty. But it was mine. That's where the first version of my business was born, a micro-bike and motorcycle repair shop. In the beginning, business was almost non-existent. I would hand out flyers on the street, knock on doors, and offer cheap services to those who had nowhere else to go. There was a day when I fixed a flat tire in exchange for a piece of bread and butter. But that's okay. I wasn't in a hurry. I just couldn't stop. Customers started coming back, and when they did, they brought new ones. Confidence grew, and with it, the structure too. After 2 years in the shop, I already had 3 employees. After 5, I opened a second location. At 27, the third. My company grew quietly, without ostentation. Meanwhile, my father and Lucia lived on Instagram, expensive dinners, trips, forced photos with Arthur in front of cars that weren't even theirs. But I knew. It was a facade. My story was being built in cement. Theirs in makeup. One day I received a partnership proposal from a large chain of workshops. They wanted my name on the brand. They wanted my management model. They wanted my method, the same one born of pain and humiliation. I signed the contract with the same pen my mom used to sign my 8th grade report card. She was beside me, her eyes full of tears. You won, son, without having to step on anyone. Smile. I knew it wasn't over yet. Because destiny was still writing the end of this story. And he was about to call me back, not as a forgotten son, but as the last voice my father would hear. The phone rang one ordinary afternoon. I was organizing the team's payments when I saw the name on the screen, Aunt Marlene, my father's sister. We hadn't spoken in months. I answered with a neutral voice, not imagining what was coming. Gustavo, your father is hospitalized. He had a heart attack. It was serious. I don't know if he'll make it through today. For a moment, the world went silent. Not out of fear or sadness, but out of confusion. He was still my father, even though he'd erased me from his life. Even after he'd cut me out of everything, there was something inside me that didn't know how to react to the idea of watching him die, without even looking me in the eye again. And where's Lucia? I asked. The answer was a dry punch. Gone. As soon as he fell, she disappeared with Arthur. No one knows where they are. It took me a few seconds to understand what she was saying. The woman he chose, the woman he protected, the woman he traded me for, abandoned him when he needed her most. Irony, Justice, karma, maybe all of this together. Maybe the universe is tired of waiting for him to see what he lost. I went to the hospital. For me, for my story, and maybe for him too, even though he didn't deserve it. When I entered the room, I almost didn't recognize the man. Thin, pale, with strands of hair scattered across the pillow and sunken eyes. The same man who once taught me how to tie my shoelaces could now barely breathe on his own. The nurse looked at me in surprise. "Are you Gustavo?" "Try. He asked about you today. He called your name several times, a little confused." That took me apart. I stood there still, staring at that frail figure that once seemed giant. He opened his eyes slowly. He looked at me for long seconds, and he tried to say something. The voice was bad. I was trembling. But he said, "Arthur, you came." No. He didn't recognize me. He called the name of his missing son. I stood there unsure whether to laugh, cry, or leave. At that moment, he wanted the son he had created. But who was there? Was the son he rejected? The doctor entered, interrupting the moment. "His condition is delicate. He requires intensive care. He has no companion, no active health plan, and no one responsible for him." The doctor's gaze was firm, as if he expected me to take over. But I just shook my head and said, "Sorry, I'm not a legal relative. I was removed from that position years ago. His heir is Arthur. Look for him." I turned my back and left, not with hate, but with the certainty that I should no longer carry a guilt that was never mine. Life is tough, and sometimes it hits you when you least expect it. He cut me out of his life. Now I was experiencing the same thing, but not for revenge. Consequently, I spent days trying to move on with my life, as if nothing had happened. But the image of him, fragile in that bed, haunted me more than I wanted to admit. As much as my reason screamed that he didn't deserve anything from me, a silent part still cared. Or maybe it was just the weight of an unresolved story. The phone rang again. It was the hospital. "Mr. Gustavo, your father has gotten worse. He's terminally ill. He keeps calling your name. I wanted you to know." I remained silent. Was that still the name he called me? The next day, I went back to the hospital. Not for him, but for me. To put an end to it. To close the cycle with your own eyes. I entered the room slowly. The light was dim. The monitor beeped slowly. He looked older than he had ever looked. When he saw me, he tried to raise his hand. It was trembling. The eyes filled with tears. And for the first time in years, he spoke my name. Clearly. "Gustavo." My heart raced. It wasn't a delusion. It wasn't Arthur. It was my name. "Sorry, son, I made a mistake." The voice was weak but true. Those 3 words, which I had waited a lifetime to hear, came like a whisper of justice. I remained standing. I didn't come closer. I didn't touch his hand. "She took me away from you. I left. You were better." The words were lost, but the intention was clear. That confession was the most valuable thing he had now. He no longer had a home, no inheritance, no family. All that remained was the weight of regret. He looked at me with pleading eyes, as if asking for time. But time, fair to all, makes no concessions. He tried to say something more, but coughed. And then he turned his face away and said nothing more. The machine next door started beeping frequently. The nurse ran. He asked me to leave. I stood in the doorway watching. I saw a man who had it all and ended up alone. A father who traded blood for looks. A husband who abandoned the one he cared for. A human being defeated not by death, but by choices. That night, he was gone. No new Will. Without Lucia. Without Arthur. but with my name on his lips. The name of the son he disowned. And in the end, he was the only one left. The burial was simple. Few people showed up. Some distant relatives, 2 old co-workers, and me. Standing at a distance watching everything from afar. Lucia didn't show up. Arthur didn't either. Even with all the effort to erase my existence in the end, only those he rejected were there. There was a moment when the priest asked if anyone would like to say a few words. People looked at each other. Nobody moved. It was then that Aunt Marlene looked at me and nodded, almost like a silent request. I climbed slowly. The cold wind bit my face, and the silence was so intense that each step sounded like thunder. I looked at the closed coffin, and I spoke. I didn't come here as a son. I came as someone who learned from pain. Someone who was forgotten, ignored, rejected, but who transformed each of those wounds into strength. I paused. He taught me 2 things. The first, what not to be. The second, that forgiveness is not something we give for those who deserve it, but for those who can no longer carry the weight of their own mistake. I looked down. I forgive you, Father, but I will never forget. I stepped down from the pulpit feeling something different. No relief, but peace. After the burial, there was no will read, no house to divide. Everything had been transferred to Lucia years before, and then resold, dilapidated, used. My name never came back on any paper, but it didn't matter anymore, because the roles that really count are those that life writes with attitude. Today, when I tell my story, I don't do it with anger. I do it as someone who overcame abandonment, overcame absence, and built his own name, without having to carry the burden of an empty surname. My mother, who saw everything up close, still hugs me as if she wanted to protect the boy from before. But I'm not that boy anymore. I am the man born of silence. I am the son who was forgotten, but no one was able to erase. And deep down, maybe that's what hurts them the most. I survived rejection, and I transformed the void they left it into space to grow.